I think the saying that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link is a really good one. It's a really good one to think about everything. And so today we're going to ask the cards a question about that. So stick around for Life's Potluck Buffet. I'm John Paulus. Thanks for joining me today. I see this saying in English, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, a lot for some reason. And I think it's a good one. Apparently, there's also a saying in Basque that I saw online, which is the thread is weakest at its thinnest part, or something like that. And, oh no, the thread breaks at its thinnest part. Yeah, that's something like that. If you are from Basque country and are a Basque speaker, please let me know what the saying is. And if you could actually pronounce it or say it in Basque, that would be awesome, because I would love to know how to pronounce that. So a saying can apply to every level of our lives. That's why I think it's a powerful one. We could think of it as, from the biggest level, the world, the universe. They're just listening to the world, The world is only as strong as its weakest link. That kind of makes sense. When we talk about anything that has a global impact, if there is a kind of weakness somewhere in terms of whatever we're talking about, that kind of weakness results in an opening for whatever bad thing that's going to happen. And so that's a really interesting way to think about like global phenomena. The same is true on the level of organizations. And the same is true in levels of countries and of organizations within countries. I'm trying to go down from level by level. I can't speak to the universe, as I'm not an astronomer or astrophysicist. But if you are an astronomer or astrophysicist and you want to talk about the whole universe in this way, please let me know. So that idea that this applies to organizations is true, and that's what we're going to ask the cards today. But it's also true that this idea applies to our smaller groups, our teams, and us individually. In terms of individually, I guess what I mean here is we know, or if we don't know, we should get in touch with what our kind of biggest weaknesses. There's a card about finding out what our biggest strength is, and also there's a card about turning our biggest weakness into our biggest strength. But finding the point at which we are most vulnerable to allow influences that are bad or negative or counterproductive to our flourishing that point is what I'm talking about. And it's the same thing is true with, as I said, on all levels, from the universe all the way down to us individually. Probably, honestly, even on a smaller level, on a microscopic level. Now, I'm not going to get into biology. I'm not a biologist. But, think about it. Where I'm sure that I assure you that a biologist would tell you that the same applies on a cellular level, where there's if there's a weakness entry point that can be exploited by a harmful outside influence, that's where it goes, rather than attacking a strong point. Now, I would bet money on that. So if you are a biologist out there, please feel free to comment on that, because I'd like to know the specifics. But I suspect from my rudimentary knowledge of biology, my school level knowledge of biology, it seems like that's going to be the case. Okay. All right. Enough about biology. Let's talk about the cards. The bottom of the deck today is mentor as if you were the one being mentored. That was card 41. We talked about that yesterday in the answer to our question yesterday. And so what I'm going to do is I'll do my 3 casual shuffles. And I'm asking the cards today how to think about organizational structure in light of the idea that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. How do we apply that idea and think about organizational structure? Okay, so let me finalize my shuffling. Okay. All right, this is really really a lot of cards here. Oh, which one's this? I guess. Okay. It was interesting. The card that stuck out the most was the card on the bottom, the very bottom of the deck, which is compose a short inscription for yourself. Oh, this is interesting. Let's think about this one. So this one is about those ancient inscriptions I was talking about the other day, like know thyself, and this is in that ancient temple in what is now Greece, in Delphi, beautiful town, ski resort, really nice in the winter too. Especially nice I think in the winter. So another one was nothing in excess is how we usually translate it, and these were inscriptions on a temple in ancient Delphi in ancient Greece. So now the card instructs us to meditate on our own inscriptions that we create for ourselves instead of meditating on these ancient descriptions and explain what it means. Now, so today's thought was about organizational structure, and well, the organization here, talking about ancient temples, they were organized structures. They were organizations, really. People don't often think about that, but these temples were connected to the political organization of the time, of the both regionally and more broadly. They were really tied into all of that, and I think that's what the card is getting at. Is we're talking about a bigger picture thing, and I think I know what it is, and it's that we often, and we talked about this yesterday about evaluation, take a moment to evaluate the external risks to an organizational structure that present themselves as the weakest link in the kind of political or social organization outside of the structure, or even the cultural organization of the industry or sector. I think that's what this card is talking about, because this ancient temple complex really gave out advice to political leaders around the kind of world in that area at the time and for a long time. And it was very important and very connected to advising political leaders. And political leaders sought out advice, and also individuals sought out advice from all of these types of temples that had what they called oracles, right? Were oracles. So I think that what the card is telling us is think about, in whatever your organization is, think about the fact that there's a culture of that type of organization, whether it's in the sector, in the politics, in the social world that surrounds that organization. There is a culture that has in it a kind of weak link entry point where things that will damage or upset the structure of the organization will occur. And that's kind of built into the structure because of all structures being part of a culture. And I think that keeping with that idea that culture is a totality, we talked about that on a card about culture a few weeks ago, but that totality of the culture in which the organization finds itself, the weaknesses of that culture will be the weaknesses of the organization. So that's something to keep in mind. Can that be solved? Not in the culture, because we don't have no one organization, no one person, no group of people have control over what a culture does. Culture is its own thing. It's behind all of this. It's its own organism. And so and an organism that we can't control, that's not in our control as individuals or even as groups. It is a much more complex thing than that. So thinking about how to, it's not patch the weakness. I think in a certain way, the weakness that is present in that culture that reflects itself in your organizational structure, and we see this, I saw this week with a very big organization, honestly. So I think that if you look for examples out there, you will find them in the headlines and in the news. And the knowing what the strength that you can rely on in order to address that weakness and allow the weakness to understand that weakness is going to be there, and instead doing the absolute best that you can as a group, as an organization, as individuals within an organization, to work from that place of strength and use that to address the vulnerabilities that are always going to be present. It's like, you can't change those vulnerabilities. You can't, it's not like patching a hole, or it's much, much different from that. That's how we often think about that, in terms of security. And how, if you patch up that hole, then everything will be airtight. And that's not going to be the case here. That's what this card is telling us. The card is telling us that vulnerability is always going to be there as a vulnerability, and there needs to be ways to address it by building on strengths that are different from that area of vulnerability that can address it. So it's a very complex thing to think about, and it depends on the specifics of the organization, of the problem, of the weakness. But using the strengths that the organization has to overcome the vulnerability that weakness provides, and allow that weakness is always going to be a weakness. So in a sense, trying to kind of isolate it a little bit, like not patch it, because we know it's still always going to be there. It's just putting it to the side as much as possible means that anything that happens there is going to be of small impact, as opposed to the strengths that you're working from, which produce a great impact. So keep that all in mind for today. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time on Life's Potluck Buffet.